People talk about power as if it lives out in the open. They imagine that anyone with enough drive can walk straight into the rooms where decisions are made. But if you have ever watched how influence actually moves, you know it does not flow like that. It travels through hidden channels, private networks, slow-built trust, and quiet agreements. The doors to the highest levels of society are never open by default. They open for some, stay shut for others, and only those who understand the rules behind those doors ever get a chance to walk through. This truth makes many people uncomfortable, but ignoring it only makes the world harder to navigate. Machiavelli understood that political reality runs on unwritten laws. He watched how nobles protected their circles and how newcomers struggled to get a foothold. His observations were blunt, often cold, but they captured something real about human behavior. Even centuries later, his ideas still help us understand why power behaves like a closed system. People with privilege instinctively protect it, and people who aspire to join them must understand the landscape well enough to step into it without stumbling. This video does not try to romanticize Machiavelli, nor does it tell you to manipulate your way through life. Instead, it breaks down the dynamics that shape elite groups so you can recognize them, think critically about them, and approach them with clear eyes. The goal is understanding, not scheming. By studying the closed-door effect, we learn how power concentrates, how people guard it, and how outsiders can build the credibility needed to be taken seriously. These ideas matter because they reveal how the world works beneath the surface and help us move through it with intention rather than confusion. 1. The idea of closed-door laws. When people hear law, they picture written statutes. Machiavelli used the word differently. His laws were the invisible patterns that powerful groups follow without ever writing them down. These closed-door laws operate as boundaries, not through force, but through shared understanding. They shape who is taken seriously, who gets invited, and who gets treated as an outsider. People inside the circle learn these laws through upbringing and social reinforcement, while outsiders often discover them only after hitting the wall. One of the most common unwritten laws is the need for familiarity. Elites tend to choose people who feel similar to themselves. This might sound simple, but it has real consequences. It affects who they hire, who they trust, and who they allow into private spaces. When someone does not match the group's style, vocabulary, habits, or background, the door remains shut. Not because that person lacks talent, but because the insiders cannot read them as easily. They prefer predictability over raw skill, because predictability protects their comfort and their status. Another closed-door law is the slow-earned currency of reputation. To people at the top, reputation is not just image, it is a form of collateral. A person with no established reputation carries risk. A person with a reputation built through consistent behavior carries value. Machiavelli observed that elites evaluate others not by potential but by demonstrated reliability. This is why it often takes years for outsiders to be recognized and only moments for insiders to be forgiven. These laws may not be fair, but they shape the system as strongly as any written rule. 2. Why elites form barriers around power. Elites do not close doors simply because they enjoy exclusion. Barriers form because power, once gained, feels fragile. Even those who appear confident know that it takes surprisingly little to lose influence, status, or position. This uncertainty pushes them to build protective walls around themselves. Machiavelli wrote that rulers fear two threats: external rivals and internal instability. The same applies to modern elites. They fear people who might disrupt their control or redefine the standards of leadership. Protecting their circle becomes a survival instinct. Another reason for these barriers is the value of trust. For people in powerful spaces, a single wrong partnership can cost reputations, resources, and alliances. Because of this, elites invest heavily in maintaining circles of familiarity. They want people who think the way they do, react the way they expect, and understand their unspoken norms. They treat trust not as something to be given freely, but as something to be guarded. This creates a cycle where the same types of people keep being selected for the same types of roles, making the structure even harder to break. The third reason elites form barriers is that exclusivity increases value. Scarcity is a form of leverage. When access to a group is limited, membership becomes a symbol of distinction. People will work harder, compromise more, and present their best selves when the door is only barely open. Machiavelli recognized that rulers often limit access, not out of necessity but out of strategy. A closed-off circle strengthens itself by making entry seem rare and desirable. This dynamic still shapes everything from corporate leadership to high society to political circles today. 3. Machiavelli's view of outsiders seeking entry. Machiavelli understood something that still applies today: outsiders who try to enter powerful spaces face more scrutiny than those already inside. He wrote that people judge newcomers with sharper eyes because they fear the disruption an outsider might bring. A newcomer must prove not only competence but also alignment with the group's existing values. This creates an uneven playing field, but it also reveals a truth. The climb into elite circles is rarely about perfect talent. It is about demonstrating consistency and control under pressure, traits insiders read as signs of loyalty and stability. Another key point in Machiavelli's writing is that outsiders often underestimate the internal dynamics of elite groups. They imagine the group as unified and confident, but in reality, it is usually a collection of individuals protecting personal interests. This misunderstanding leads many newcomers to approach power with the wrong strategy. They focus on impressing the group as a whole, instead of understanding the individuals who hold real influence within it. Machiavelli believed that the person who learns the social terrain before acting has a far better chance of being welcomed than the one who charges in head first. Machiavelli also advised that newcomers should not try to recreate the power structure in their own image too quickly. Change, even when beneficial, often feels threatening to insiders. People who already have power rarely appreciate disruption from someone who has not yet proven themselves. Instead, Machiavelli suggested a gradual approach. He argued that an outsider must first adapt to the existing norms, build credibility, and then slowly introduce their own style. This does not mean surrendering identity. It means timing strategy intelligently, because timing is where newcomers often win or lose their chance. 4. The role of social signaling. Social signaling is one of the strongest forces behind elite circles. It decides who blends in, who stands out, and who gets ignored before even speaking a word. These signals may seem trivial on the surface, but they carry weight inside closed-door environments. The way someone speaks, the pace of their confidence, the references they make, and the subtle cues in their behavior all help insiders decide whether someone belongs. Machiavelli did not use modern language, but his observations on reputation and perception align perfectly with the idea that signals shape status long before merit is evaluated. The first type of signal elites pay attention to is behavioral. This includes composure, pacing, attentiveness, and emotional control. People in powerful settings favor those who stay balanced under pressure, because they view calmness as a sign of reliability. Outsiders who show insecurity or eagerness too early are often dismissed as inexperienced. This does not mean suppressing personality. It means recognizing that in high-level spaces people listen more to the tone than to the words. A person who speaks slowly and confidently sends a stronger signal than someone who rushes to prove themselves. Another major form of signaling is cultural fluency. This is not about pretending to be someone else. It is about understanding the unspoken references, shared experiences, and conversational rhythms that define the group. Elites often bond over specific knowledge, not because the knowledge itself matters, but because it signals shared background or intellectual compatibility. When a newcomer lacks that fluency, Insiders interpret it as distance or unpredictability. Machiavelli would argue that learning these signals is not manipulation. It is simply understanding the environment you wish to operate in, the same way a diplomat learns the customs of a foreign court. 5. Networks as pathways, not shortcuts. People sometimes imagine that a single connection can open every door. In reality, networks work differently. A network is not a shortcut. It is a pathway built over time through genuine relationships. Machiavelli recognized this long before modern sociology existed. He observed that alliances matter only when they are grounded in mutual benefit and trust. A weak or one-sided connection does little for an outsider. A strong connection, built through consistent value, can lead to opportunities, protection, and access that would otherwise be out of reach. The first important truth about networks is that they are ecosystems. One strong relationship is useful, but a cluster of relationships is transformative. People in elite circles rarely rely on a single ally. They rely on webs of support. For outsiders, this means that broad trust often matters more than individual approval. A newcomer who builds credibility with several respected figures gains stability. If one alliance falters, others remain. This makes the climb less fragile and signals to insiders that the newcomer has staying power. Another truth is that networks favor reciprocity. People at the top are used to others seeking favors, so they pay close attention to who brings value, not just who asks for it. Machiavelli emphasized that a ruler should be generous carefully and strategically, and the same applies to modern relationships. Outsiders gain more respect by offering skills, insight, or support, rather than relying on charm alone. Value creates loyalty. Loyalty creates trust. Trust opens the doors that talent alone cannot. This is how networks evolve from casual interactions into real pathways toward influence. 6. The psychology of belonging and exclusion. Belonging is one of the strongest human instincts. Even people with power are driven by the desire to feel understood and supported. This instinct shapes how elite groups behave. They gravitate toward people who reflect their world, because familiarity feels safe. Outsiders who do not understand this often think rejection is about merit, when it is usually about comfort. Machiavelli understood that the emotional side of politics is just as important as the strategic side. People cling to what feels predictable, even when a fresh perspective might serve them better. Exclusion, on the other hand, forms almost naturally. When people bond through shared habits, they unintentionally create barriers around their group. Those barriers can harden into rules. The more cohesive the group becomes, the more suspicious it grows of anything that might disrupt that cohesion. Outsiders sometimes step into these spaces with the right skills but the wrong presence, and they are pushed out not because they lack talent, but because the group senses a change in tone. This is how power structures renew themselves without ever needing to say you don't belong here. Another psychological force at play is fear of replacement. Elites, despite their confidence, often fear losing their relevance. When a newcomer arrives with new ideas or strong ambition, insiders sometimes respond defensively. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must watch for rivals who rise too quickly, because rapid growth creates anxiety in those who hold power. Modern elites behave the same way. They want new people around them, but they prefer newcomers who rise at a pace they can control. This tension shapes how they welcome or reject outsiders who seek entry. 7. Skill versus perception. One of the most frustrating truths about elite environments is that perception often matters more than raw skill. Many talented outsiders never get invited into powerful circles simply because they do not look or sound like what the group expects. Skill may open the conversation, but perception determines whether the conversation continues. Machiavelli understood this well. He wrote that leaders must not only be good but appear good, because people judge what they see before they judge what is real. In elite spaces, appearance is not vanity, it is currency. Perception shapes expectations. When someone enters with confidence, clarity, and steadiness, insiders assume competence before seeing any actual proof. When someone enters nervously or tries too hard to impress, insiders assume inexperience regardless of the outsider's actual skill. This dynamic frustrates many people who feel overlooked, but understanding it allows outsiders to position themselves with more control. People who master perception do not need to pretend. They simply need to refine how they present their strengths so that others can recognize them. Skill becomes powerful only when paired with strategic visibility. Machiavelli believed that great abilities must be displayed at the right time and in the right context. If a newcomer showcases skill too early, it may be ignored or seen as an attempt to overshadow the group. If they reveal it too late, they risk being dismissed before anyone sees what they can do. The craft lies in pacing. Outsiders who pace their skill thoughtfully create long-term impressions that shift perception in their favor. 8. The cost of entry. Every elite circle comes with a cost of entry, even if it is not spoken openly. Some costs are economic, such as the price of education, travel, appearance, or lifestyle. Others are social, such as time invested in relationship building, learning collective norms, or refining communication. Machiavelli observed that climbing into powerful positions often requires sacrifice. A newcomer has to give something up, whether it is time, neutrality, or comfort. This cost often filters who persists and who stops halfway. Another cost is vulnerability. Outsiders must be willing to enter spaces where they are not fully understood or accepted. This can feel uncomfortable and even discouraging. But this discomfort is part of the process. People who are already inside those circles rarely realize how intimidating they can seem. They forget how many invisible tests they once had to pass. For an outsider, the willingness to handle discomfort without losing composure signals maturity, which elites value more than enthusiasm or ambition alone. The hardest cost of entry is patience. Elite circles rarely grant instant acceptance. Trust grows slowly, and reputation builds over repeated interactions. Machiavelli believed that political change happens gradually, through steady groundwork. The same applies to social elevation. Outsiders who expect quick results often misinterpret the process as rejection, when in reality they are being observed. People in powerful positions watch newcomers for consistency. They want to see whether the outsider's values remain steady over time. That patience is the real toll the gate takes. 9. Adaptation without self-erasure. Adaptation is often misunderstood. Outsiders sometimes think that fitting into elite circles means abandoning their identity. In reality, adaptation is about reading the room while keeping your core intact. Machiavelli advised leaders to adjust their behavior depending on the situation, not to become shapeless, but to become effective. Adaptation is a strategic choice, not a surrender. Outsiders who manage this balance show that they can operate in different environments without losing authenticity. A major part of adaptation is learning the group's communication rhythm. Elite circles often speak in shorthand, reference shared experiences, or discuss topics in indirect ways. This can feel unfamiliar at first. But with time, newcomers can learn the pattern without mimicking it awkwardly. The goal is not to copy insiders. The goal is to understand the tone well enough to contribute in a way that feels natural. When outsiders participate with confidence and clarity, insiders begin to view them as peers rather than guests. Maintaining identity while adapting takes discipline. People sometimes overcorrect by trying too hard to blend in, which leads to discomfort and misalignment. Machiavelli believed that a person should never give up their core virtues, because those virtues shape their long-term success. Outsiders who stay grounded in who they are while adjusting the edges of their approach gain respect more quickly. They show they are flexible without being malleable, steady without being rigid, and confident without being overbearing. 10. The importance of controlled visibility. Visibility is often treated as something that should be pursued aggressively, but Machiavelli saw it differently. He believed that people in pursuit of influence should be visible at the right moments, not all moments. Controlled visibility communicates intention, maturity, and self-awareness. When outsiders push too hard for attention, they appear desperate. When they hide entirely, they appear unsure of themselves. The most effective approach is strategic presence. It allows a newcomer to be seen, understood, and evaluated without overwhelming the room. Controlled visibility also shapes how insiders perceive risk. Elite groups tend to avoid people who seem unpredictable or attention-hungry. If someone demands recognition too early, the group may see them as a threat rather than an asset. Gradual visibility works better because it lets the outsider build trust while revealing their strengths little by little. Machiavelli valued patience because it gives a person the power to time their moves when conditions favor them. In modern settings, this looks like choosing moments to contribute when the contribution genuinely advances the conversation. The final layer of controlled visibility is consistency. Being visible once makes a moment. Being visible consistently makes a reputation. Outsiders earn their place not through a single strong impression, but through a pattern of reliable performance. When insiders see that pattern, they begin to predict how the outsider will behave in future situations. That predictability builds trust, and trust clears the way for deeper inclusion. Reputation grows steadily, and each visible moment strengthens the last. 11. Quiet influence versus loud appeal. Many people imagine that influence comes from commanding attention. But in elite circles, quiet influence often carries more weight. Loudness can be interpreted as insecurity or as a bid for control. Quiet influence, on the other hand, signals authority without effort. Machiavelli understood that the most effective power is the kind that does not announce itself. People who influence quietly move conversations, shape decisions, and build alliances without demanding recognition. Their effectiveness lies in subtlety. Quiet influence works because it focuses on substance rather than performance. Instead of trying to stand out, the person works to become indispensable. They listen carefully, observe dynamics, and choose their words with precision. This creates an aura of stability. Insiders learn that when this person speaks, the contribution will matter. Over time, quiet influence reshapes how the group operates. Because people begin to rely on the outsider's judgment. This is how influence develops without friction. Loud appeal, while sometimes useful, can backfire in elite circles. People in positions of power often resist anyone who tries to dominate the room without first earning credibility. Machiavelli warned against displays of ambition that feel uncontrolled. He believed that ambition should be guided, not flaunted. Outsiders who rely on loud appeal risk sending the wrong signal, making insiders more cautious around them. Quiet influence builds alliance. Loud appeal builds attention, but attention without trust rarely leads to lasting power. Conclusion. Power has always moved behind doors that only a few know how to open. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago, and his insights still echo today, because human behavior has not changed as much as technology or institutions have. People protect what they built. They form tight circles, favor those who feel familiar, and create unwritten rules that outsiders must learn to read. These patterns are not mysterious once you look at them clearly, but they remain invisible to those who expect the world to operate on talent alone. Understanding them does not mean becoming manipulative. It means recognizing how social systems actually work, so you can navigate them with intention. Throughout this essay, the focus has been on clarity rather than fantasy. Elite circles are not impenetrable, but they are selective. They reward adaptation, composure, consistency, and timing. They respond to trust more than brilliance and a steady presence more than loud ambition. Outsiders who hope to move upward must understand these dynamics, not to play a game, but to avoid misreading the environment. When people know the rules, they stop stumbling. They stop taking rejection personally. They start shaping their approach with patience and awareness. Machiavelli would argue that this shift from impulse to strategy is what separates those who rise from those who remain stuck at the gate. In the end, infiltrating the elite is not about sneaking into forbidden circles. It is about developing the qualities that any high-level environment expects: emotional steadiness, social fluency, timing, and reputation that holds up under pressure. The doors are closed, yes, but they are not welded shut. They open for people who bring value without chaos, presence without desperation, and identity without rigidity. Machiavelli's lessons remind us that power is not given. It is recognized. The more you understand the landscape, the clearer your path becomes. And once you understand how the room works, you stop worrying about getting inside and start focusing on what you will do when you finally enter.